You're looking here on my left, a very expensive, and I would consider the top of the line spotting scope in the market. This is the ATX 95 from Swarovski with a 30 to 70 power zoom. This here on my right is, I would consider, a more budget friendly option at almost 1/10 the cost of this Swarovski, which is going to be probably in the almost $6,000 range with some very convenient options you might want to add, versus this one at closer to $600 all in. So is there any real advantage to having the more expensive scope? Honestly, I usually gravitate to the theory of buy once, cry once. I want a quality product that I can know is going to do the job exactly how I want it done every time, to the best of the ability of the equipment. So honestly, I wasn't thinking that there would be much chance that a cheaper scope was going to have any ability to compete in its fit and finish and its feature sets and the capabilities that I need it to be able to do. However, I get in these conversations with people that I am around, friends or family, neighbors who perhaps are that I might share an opportunity with for hunting or for birding, or if we're out, photoing, photography, doing photography for wildlife or scenery. And if they get behind this scope, and if they've never been behind a spotting scope before, maybe they're used to using binoculars, conventional telescopes for astronomy or others, and they see my spotting scope and they say, hey, can I look through that? And I let them use the tool. They say, wow, that's amazing. Look how much I can see so far away. We've seen animals up to 10 miles away with this. And that's incredible under the right lighting conditions for somebody who's never looked through something like this, for them to see what the capabilities of this tool are. But inevitably they say, wow, I want something like that. What does that cost? What would it cost for me to get that? I want to buy one. And I say, you don't want to know. And they say, oh, no, come on, just tell me. You can tell me. Tell me what it costs. And I say, oh, you really don't want to know. And they say, yes, I do. And I finally cave and I say, well, this scope here is probably going to run you $4, $5, even $6,000 to get a scope of this caliber. And that shuts down the conversation really, really quickly. But I've come to realize that these are still people who have recognized that they like what this can do. They like the opportunity to be able to see things so far away and to do the birding or the photography or the hunting activities that they want to perform, and they want to do it to a higher level than they had been doing with the tools they've already used. And so I find myself at a disadvantage in saying, just leaving the conversation at, well, that's $6,000. You can't afford it, so why even think about it? When I'd like to be able to suggest an alternative. And maybe that alternative is a $2,000 scope, right? But you would intuitively believe that there's still a disadvantage between the $2,000 scope and the $6,000 scope. But you're still out of pocket $2,000 or $3,000 or whatever it might be for the mid-grade scope. And so I wanted to see if there was any reason why a person would consider a $600 scope as a viable alternative. Is there anything that this scope can do that this could even come close to being able to do just as well? Or is this a waste of money? Is this a glorified paperweight? And so we did some side-by-side testing where you'll see in this video where we look out to 2,600 yards, and we're looking at objects, some towers, in very, very low light conditions up to 45 minutes past daylight, past sunset, which is well past, visible daylight. It was beyond the time I could even physically see the towers with my naked eye, but we were still able to see images through the scopes beyond that point. And we honestly were having a hard time seeing a difference between the two scopes. Now, that's not to say that there aren't advantages to this scope and perhaps disadvantages with this scope, but they were much closer than I honestly expected them to be in their performance and capabilities. And so hopefully you'll be able to see. Now you'll see that the limitation is honestly with the phone scope or the phone digiscoping capabilities, because it's filmed. I tried to get a smartphone camera to take the same images through both scope lenses to be able to then have you, the viewer, see as close to a comparable image as possible. So there's going to be limitations as to what the phone and that phone camera truly can do when you're comparing the two side by side. But if you want to take my word for it, the view itself was very, very comparable. There were things that, or excuse me, I should say, there weren't really anything that I couldn't resolve with the Swarovski that I couldn't get an equally focused image of with the SVBONY. That said, like I said, there are certainly differences. The Swarovski has a much wider field of view than the SVBONY. I was estimating somewhere about 10 to 15 feet at about 2,000 yards, which is, for some, they're going to say that's not insignificant. You know, when you're looking at a field of view and it might be a few 100 yards wide, you know, to have one scope that can see 15 yards more than that might be something that's really important to somebody. But at the end of the day, a lot of the other physical features like eye relief are very, very similar to my eye. I could get into both with my glasses. In fact, maybe a slight advantage to this SVBONY where the at max power on the Swarovski at the lens of my glasses actually touches, which is a little bit annoying if you have glasses, whereas it didn't on the SVBONY. You're going to notice a lot more similarities, honestly, than differences. You know, even the little rubberized armor on these is very, very similar between the two of them. Both have the ability for the extending objective lens. Both have the opportunity to put on some sort of a stay-on case. In this case, for the Swarovski, this is a almost $350 option that you have to buy separately, whereas for the SVBONY, this case comes free with when you buy the scope. So what is it, you know, at the end of the day, what's going to be the best scope for you? You know, that is going to be probably dependent upon whether or not a $5,000 or a $6,000 or even a $2,000 or $3,000 scope option is even an alternative for you. But when I was comparing these side by side, I can honestly say that there was I was pleasantly surprised at the capability of something like this being, you know, it still is it's a double ED glass. It's, you know, it's got a big objective lens. It's got a wide zoom capability, 25 to 75. It has the features that I would want to see in a big scope like this. And at the end of the day, I could make something like this work. So, quick little feature, couple of things to compare here. Both of these have the ability to adjust at the barrel here just by loosening that. You can adjust those on and off. Same thing here with this SVBONY. If I turn that around, you can see the knob. You just unscrew that and that can spin, so you can adjust the placement of that relative to your tripod. That's a neat feature that you don't see in every scope, that collar. So that's a useful feature here. The focus ring on the SVBONY is tighter than the Swarovski, which, you know, I like a looser. It's easier to move, even one-fingered if necessary, than the tighter focus ring. You know, both eyepieces have the ability to extend to adjust for that eye relief if you don't have glasses. I mean, honestly, there are probably more similarities than there are differences. The one physical difference of note, though, is this SVBONY is 24 ounces heavier than this Swarovski. We're talking 1.5 pounds heavier. So for some, that's going to be a non-issue. If I'm using the scope exclusively out of the vehicle like I do, that's a non-issue. It doesn't go anywhere but from the car to a glassing point. I don't care about the extra weight. If you're packing it into the hills, though, if this is your one and done scope and you need it to be packed in 10 miles, and you've also got your camp on your back or other hunting equipment or whatever you might have, an extra 1.5 pounds is a considerable weight penalty, and that is something to think about. Now, you could just go to a smaller scope. This brand has smaller scopes as well. Certainly Swarovski would have smaller scopes. There are lighter, smaller options from a number of brands, of course. So that might be a better consideration than worrying so much about it. For our purposes, we're here really more to compare the capabilities of the scope. Can I get the same viewing experience from this one that I can get from the more expensive option? And at the end of the day, it's really, really close, to be honest with you. So any questions, put them in the comments below.